Your car payment is probably the most expensive wealth mistake you are making right now. According to the latest data from Experian's State of the Automotive Finance Market for the third quarter of 2025, the average monthly payment on a new vehicle in America has reached $748, and Americans collectively carry $1.655 trillion in auto loan debt, second only to mortgages among all forms of consumer borrowing. Let that number settle for a moment. $1.655 trillion. Not invested, not building equity, locked into vehicles that lose value from the second they leave the lot. And most of the people making those payments have no idea there is a simple rule, the 5% rule, that could have prevented them from ending up there. Once you understand it, you will never look at a car purchase the same way again. Here is what the 5% rule says. Your total monthly car payment, the loan only, not insurance, not gas, should not exceed 5% of your gross monthly income, not 10. 5. That number is not arbitrary. It is the threshold that separates people who use a car as transportation from people who use a car as a financial anchor that quietly weighs down everything else they are trying to build. Think about what it means in practice. If your household brings in the median American income of $83,730 per year, which is the figure the Census Bureau reported for 2024, your gross monthly income is about $6,977. 5% of that is $349 per month. The average American's new car payment is more than double that threshold, and most people who sign that loan never did that math before walking into the dealership. The reason most people skip the math goes directly back to how dealerships are trained to sell. The single most effective psychological manipulation in car sales is shifting your attention from total cost to monthly payment. A dealer who asks, "What can you do monthly?" has just transformed a $45,000 purchase decision into a question about whether you can handle another $100 per month. Research in behavioral economics shows that when decisions are framed around small, recurring costs rather than total price, people consistently underweight the full financial commitment. You walk in intending to be responsible, and you walk out having agreed to 84 months of payments, which, by the way, according to Edmunds data for the second quarter of 2025, now represents 22.4% of all new vehicle financing, an all-time high. 84 months. That is 7 years. Here is why that loan length matters so much more than most people realize. A new car loses roughly 20% of its value in the first year alone, according to Edmunds analysts. The front of a long-term loan is almost entirely interest. You are barely touching the principal in the early months, so you are paying aggressively on a loan while your vehicle's value is retreating in the other direction. That gap is what creates negative equity, and the data from the fourth quarter of 2025 shows it has become a full-blown crisis. Edmunds reported that 29.3% of trade-ins toward new car purchases in that period had negative equity, the highest share since the first quarter of 2021. The average amount owed on those underwater loans hit an all-time high of $7,214, and a record 27% of those underwater trade-ins carried more than $10,000 in negative equity. These are not people who made obviously reckless decisions. Many of them followed the general cultural script for buying a car in America. The psychological mechanism that drives this pattern is one Morgan Housel identifies plainly in his work on the psychology of money. He writes that spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. And in a conversation with CNBC about his most recent writing, he made the point about cars specifically, that if nobody was watching, most people would not want a fancy car at all. They would want utility. The desire for a vehicle that exceeds your means is almost entirely social signaling, and the painful irony is that social signaling through cars does not work the way your brain imagines it will. Behavioral research on hedonic adaptation, the documented tendency for humans to quickly return to a baseline level of satisfaction after any purchase, consistently shows that the excitement of a new car fades within weeks. The status you believed you would feel becomes background noise. The payment, however, stays exactly the same for 7 years. What you want instead is the 5% rule operating as a hard ceiling before you ever step onto a lot. The practical test is this. Take your gross monthly income, Multiply it by 0.05, and that is the maximum car payment you should carry. Period. If the vehicle you are considering produces a payment above that number, it is not the right vehicle for your financial life right now. Regardless of how reasonable the dealer makes it sound, regardless of what your coworker drives, regardless of what you feel you deserve after years of working hard. Those are emotional arguments. The 5% number is a financial one. Now let's be clear about what this does and does not mean. The 5% rule is not telling you to drive a beater that breaks down every other month and costs you more in repairs than a payment would. Transportation is a genuine necessity for most Americans, and reliability matters. What the rule does is give you a ceiling that keeps your largest depreciating asset from consuming the share of your income that could otherwise compound. Because here is the math that most car buyers never run. The average new car payment of $748 exceeds the median earner's 5% threshold by roughly $400 per month. If that $400 were invested monthly into a broad market index fund that returned the historical long-term average of approximately 10% annually, it would grow to more than $800,000 over 30 years. That is not a trick of compounding presented to be shocking. It is straightforward math. The car was never just a car. It was a long-term wealth decision disguised as a transportation decision. There are 3 self-sabotaging mistakes worth naming specifically because they are so common. The first is rolling negative equity forward. When nearly 30% of Americans trading in a vehicle already owe more than the car is worth and then use that trade-in toward a new loan, they are compounding a financial problem while believing they are solving it. Edmunds' data shows that buyers who rolled negative equity into a new loan in the fourth quarter of 2025 paid an average monthly payment of $916, a record high, and $144 more per month than the overall industry average. That rollover does not fix anything. It buries the problem deeper and makes the hole wider. The second mistake is dramatically overestimating what your current car is worth. A CarEdge survey from 2024 found that 61% of drivers believe their vehicle is worth more than its actual trade-in value, with 18% overestimating by $5,000 or more. You cannot make a sound financial decision about a trade-in based on an inflated mental valuation. The third mistake is comparing your payment to others rather than to your own income. A friend who makes $140,000 and drives a car with a $700 payment is in a very different financial position than someone making $60,000 with the same payment. Your ceiling is yours. Run the 5% against your number. So here is the concrete action step for this week, and it is one you can complete before you buy your next vehicle or before you consider trading in your current one. Pull up 3 figures: your gross monthly income, the current payoff balance on your existing car if you have one, and the estimated market value of that car from a source like Kelley Blue Book or Edmunds' appraisal tool. Subtract the payoff balance from the market value. If the number is negative, you are underwater. Do not trade in. Then calculate 5% of your gross monthly income and write that number down. That is your maximum payment target. If you are currently paying more than that, you now understand what it is costing your long-term financial position, and you can make a plan. If you are shopping for a vehicle, that 5% figure is the ceiling you bring to every negotiation, and you do not let a monthly payment framing pull you above it. You know the total price, you know your ceiling, and you decide from there. The most important behavioral shift in this entire conversation is one Morgan Housel captures cleanly. Real wealth is invisible. It is the money you did not spend on the payment that was $500 above your threshold. It is the investments that compound quietly while someone else spends decades paying for an image that nobody notices as much as they imagined. The 5% rule is not a restriction on living well. It is the structure that makes living well possible later when compound interest has had enough time to work. That is the kind of framework we build every week at NextGen Finance. Behavioral anchors that protect your money from the psychological traps that are specifically designed to separate you from it. Subscribing means you get every one of those frameworks delivered directly, so your financial decisions are built on research rather than instinct and emotion. What does your current car situation look like? Are you above the 5% threshold, below it, or somewhere in the middle? And did you run the math before you bought? Drop your honest answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and your story helps shape what we cover next. This video is for educational purposes only and is not financial or investment advice. Please do your own research and consult a licensed financial professional before making any financial decisions.